Good morning and welcome to this video on classical criminology for the criminology class at Glenville State University, fall of 2022. In this particular video, we are going to talk about the beginnings of scientific criminology. Now, just to mention Jeremy Bentham a little bit, Jeremy Bentham was a true believer in the principles of utilitarianism that we discussed earlier. Now, the individualized philosophy of utilitarianism, that individual human beings seek to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, influenced Bentham in his principles of morals and legislation. So I highly recommend that you read the entire book if you can. But for this class, you will have just minimal readings in that text. But Jeremy Bentham was very similar in his theory to Cesare Beccaria, whom we will now discuss. So now this is Cesare Beccaria. In the late 1800s, he authored a book called On Crime and Punishment. Now, at the time Beccaria was creating his philosophy, it's important to understand that what was and was not a crime might change from day to day based on the whim of the monarch, the king, the Kaiser, whatever they were called, based on the monarch. A monarch could arbitrarily throw someone into prison simply because they didn't like a joke they told, all sorts of different reasons for that. But Cesare Beccaria basically said, you know something? Human beings are rational creatures. After all, we're living here at the tail end of the age of the Enlightenment, right? We're about to experience the Industrial Revolution. Now, of course, he did not know that. So I'm speaking metaphorically with this, but basically he's saying, you know, we live in the age of the Enlightenment where we realize that human beings are rational creatures. Well, if they're rational creatures, then we can actually prevent crime if we play on their sense of rationality. So number one, they have to know what is and is not a crime. Now, if we do that, then we have number two, which is we can deter them from committing those crimes. In other words, according to Cesare Beccaria, we have to have encoded in law what is a crime. If it's not encoded in law, then it can't be a crime. A person cannot be convicted of committing a crime unless that crime is encoded in law. Does this sound eerily similar to what the founding fathers of the United States wrote into our Constitution? There is a very strong belief that Beccaria influenced their thinking. We know that they read his work, and On Crime and Punishment was not his only work, but it's the one that applies to criminal justice. So Cesare Beccaria, okay, that point two, remember, number one, if we have number one encoded into law what is a crime, then we can have number two, which is we can deter individuals from committing crimes. In order to do that, there are three elements that are necessary according to Beccaria. Number one, certainty. The person who might commit a crime, in order to rationalize to not do it, needs to be certain that they will get caught, that they will be detected. So certainty, number one. Number two, swiftness. That person who might commit a crime, once they're certain they're going to get caught, they need to know that that punishment is coming quickly. It's going to be swift. Okay? And then number three, proportionality. Now, that's not Beccaria's word. Celerity is the word that's usually used here, but proportionality, I think, is a better descriptive term. And that is that the punishment itself must be in proportion to the crime that was committed, using the principles of utilitarianism, so that the punishment is so much beyond the pleasure of the crime that the individual will rationalize that the punishment is too high a price to pay for the pleasure of committing the crime. Crime doesn't pay is the idea. Let's make it just harsh enough so that the individual will decide crime doesn't pay. Now, that's in proportion to the pleasure that would be derived from the crime. Okay? Now, hopefully, many of you are already beginning to see the fatal flaw, and there are two of them actually that I want to point out, but the fatal flaws in Beccaria's theory. The first one is that I may derive more pleasure out of a particular crime than another person. Therefore, my punishment, if we're individualizing this, my punishment would need to be harsher than theirs for the exact same crime. And if we do that, we call that in a free society injustice, because the punishments have to be the same. So there is the individual differences in the level of pleasure and pain that each individual might get from that. Okay, so that's one fatal flaw. The other fatal flaw is that the individual may not be able to rationalize. We know today that there are a lot of individuals that even though they don't think rationally. They're not using true logic. So Beccaria believed that individuals would use true logic. We now know there are a lot of individuals that don't. In fact, most of us use poor logic. The reality is that the majority of us need to work hard to not use poor logic. Okay. Well, Beccaria also identified two different types of deterrence. The first one is general. So general deterrence is that I see someone else getting caught, quickly punished, and the punishment is this harsh. I don't want to go through that. Therefore, I'm not going to commit a crime at all. That's general deterrence. It deters others who are observing, who are witnessing that individual being punished. And then there's specific deterrence. Specific deterrence is that I've been punished. I don't want to be punished again. Gee, that punishment sucked. So I don't want that again. As a result, I'm not going to commit any more crimes. So that's specific deterrence. General deterrence, I see the punishment of others, decide not to commit a crime in the first place. Specific deterrence, I suffer the punishment myself and decide I don't want it anymore. I'm going to stop committing crimes. Now, general deterrence could also be I've already committed crimes but never been caught. I see what happens when somebody does. So that also fits under general deterrence. Now, I want to say one more thing, and that is Beccaria's view of the death penalty. While he did make exceptions for its extremely rare use, Beccaria believed that the death penalty was not a deterrent, either in general or specific. Obviously not specific. If you're dead, then there's no way you can think, I don't want to do this again, right? But he did not see it in general as a deterrent for general deterrence. All that does is make individuals fear their government rather than truly deter them from committing crimes against the public. And by the way, if you'll notice that in the United States, most of our indictments will say that the person committed this particular crime against the peace and dignity of the state, like the state of West Virginia, the state of New York, the state of Alabama, whichever state. Because Beccaria also advocated for the understanding that we're not offending the monarch, we're offending the people, the citizens, when we commit crimes. I'm going to stop the screen share. That is a very oversimplified explanation of Beccaria in classical criminology. The number one thing is using an individual's rationality to deter them from committing crimes. That is the foundation upon which Beccaria's 3 principles and 2 types of deterrence are built. So try to remember that, and we will see you next video.